So Fasi, tell me, how would you define Fasi Zaka? क्या कहेंगे आपका तारुफ क्या होना चाहिए?
Um, I don't know. I've done a number of things in my life, so I guess most people know me from media and maybe writing, also from humor and satire. But professionally, I've taught at university. I've worked in communications and then in the development sector. So I guess um, I'm not sure how to define myself. Like because I hope कि गुजारे हाल इंसान समझते हो तो that'll be enough for me.
Definitely. नहीं, you have such a keen eye on the social and political issues, and then your wit. तो हम तो आपको देखते रहते हैं, सोशल मीडिया पे भी फॉलो करते हैं. फसी, मुझे ये बताइए कि what in your opinion is the main cause of Pakistan's social and political crisis? ये क्या वजह है कि हम as a nation अभी तक अपनी कोई direction नहीं बना पाए हैं, in your opinion?
So I'm one of those people who believe that the sole cause is the civil-military imbalance. I think that आपके जो भी social issues होते हैं या if your society has to move forward, it needs time to both change. और दूसरा उसमें ये होता है is that change जब भी आता है there is a contestation process. Like whatever you choose to bring on, it cannot usually in any democracy or in any country where there are multiple ethnic interests, there are multiple even sectarian interests, that it happens on its own as initially envisaged. So उस process में you get accommodations, and for that you need time. Secondly, each time we have an interruption in our democratic process. उसमें जब आप dictator का देखते हैं, the dictator's handbook जो है is fairly constant in Pakistan. उनका belief ये है कि यार I have to deal with so many different groups. हर एक and to them, right, 1 million people is nothing. Right? They think of 50 million people, tend to be sometimes Punjab centric, a little bit Karachi centric. तो उनका ये होता है कि why are these irritants still there? And for them, their net solution is कि यार why can't different identities be erased, different interests be erased, and as a result, you have some kind of monolithic identity. कि अब सब and the irony is that the monolithic identity जो वो चाहते हैं is a people that end up supporting a strong man. इसलिए जब आपकी ये democratic future में even in times of civilian rule एक चीज बार presidential system without realizing the presidential system has been tried twice and for a decade each time. It's just called dictatorship. So it's not going to necessarily change. So जब तक ये imbalance नहीं खत्म होता, so I think लोग जो कहते हैं कि like why are we going in stops and starts, because आपको एक दफ़ा 20 साल इस process को देना होगा. दूसरा ये है कि I think we're generous people in many ways, charitable, ये सब कुछ. लेकिन जो ideation है जमहूरियत का, उसमें you have to realize is that people are not necessarily going to support who you're going to support. और जो भी आपका process होगा उसमें give and take होगा. And to be honest, I mean, ये जब हम कभी left वाले, हम सब, I guess we are a bit left oriented, progressive oriented, लेकिन हम में भी ये मसला होता है, right? कि there is a portion of the our population that will believe in hard right issues, and if they're not infringing on the rights of anyone else, they have the right to live their life the way they want. उनकी भी एक representation होनी चाहिए. तो ये जो accommodation का मसला है is our real issue. Like आजकल आपका I think like if you do a analysis of one of the reasons for why Imran couldn't achieve what he wanted was because at the very beginning he self-sabotaged himself. which was he had an opportunity to deliver without the impediment of the establishment, which is something every civilian government has always dreamed of.
Right.
But then, because in his worldview, he can't understand why anyone would support X, Y, or Z party. कि इसका solution ये है कि इनको बिल्कुल खत्म कर दें, इनको cases में मुलविस कर दें. It distracted his government. So, I mean, your question's answer is not that easy. लेकिन जो मेरा अपना analysis है वो एक ये है कि एक जब तक ये civil military imbalance होगा, ये कभी कम हो जाता है, कभी ज़्यादा हो जाता है, लेकिन it keeps yo-yoing in a way that you can't go down a straight line. And then the second problem is that you don't give enough time for any reform, any change to happen. And the third is that we've introduced ideas into our discourse which aims to worship the strong man, a messiah figure, without actually promoting the idea कि यार accommodation करनी है, इसी से चीजें आगे निकलेंगी.
But Fasi, I can also, sort of argue that because Pakistan has, like you said, so much diversity in terms of ethnicities, in terms of even, religious beliefs, कि वो आप फिर एक national identity कैसे बनाएंगे? वो कैसे merge होगी कि हम, इतने ज़्यादा accommodating हो जाएंगे कि हम फिर fragment हो जाएंगे? ये fear है ना basically तो.
I agree, and I think कि आप जो कह रहे हैं is also a legit fear. लेकिन your national identity can also be composed on values of tolerance, of values of difference, of the need to not be majoritarian. अगर आप देखें, the interesting thing is पाकिस्तान किस चीज़ पे बना था? I mean, we argue about Islam and we argue about all these different things about different religions. लेकिन एक लिहाज से जो analysis था, at least from the Muslim League और वो था, उनका डर in one way was also from a certain form of democracy, which is majoritarianism. Just because you have greater numbers, what you want will happen. I think that was a legitimate fear because वो 1940s में भी जो हुकूमत चली थी, उनको अंदाजा हो गया था कि accommodation नहीं है इसमें, ठीक है. अब जब आप देख रहे हैं पिछले 10 साल की इंडिया को, there is at least some sense कि they were right in that. So अगर आपका मुल्की facilitate any form, I mean the way is that you don't believe that just minorities are correct. Usme you facilitate minorities and sometimes more than number. And I think in some ways like Pakistan does do that. लेकिन as वो जो आपकी बात है कि you're bringing it together as a value, I think Pakistan is now sufficiently educated कि अगर सिंधी बोलता है, ठीक है, बलोची बोलता है, पश्तो बोलता है, पंजाबी बोलता है, कोई मुल्क नहीं खत्म होने वाला. बस सिर्फ उनको थोड़ी सी इज्जत दे दो, ठीक है. When they have an objection over something, it is sufficient to hear that objection and even change course. Like ये जो I feel कि एक paranoid worldview engender हो गया है कि these differences are sufficient for dissolution of the federation. They're not. The only time we've ever seen where the dissolution of the federation has happened is when we tried to stem those differences. Like East Pakistan, ठीक है ना, ये जो बलूचिस्तान में मसले आ गए हैं, ये जो ट्राइबल एरियाज में आ गए थे, ये तो इससे इतना नहीं आए थे कि they just asked for a number of things. हाँ ठीक है, उनमें problem actors भी हैं, लेकिन I believe कि the opposite is more dangerous than actually accommodation.
Ajay Fasi, when you look back to the history, so do you see there was any point or any leader जहाँ पे लगा कि it was a near miss, कहीं अगर वो हो जाता या ये रह जाता तो कुछ चीजें बेहतर हो जाती?
I think 1990 में Benazir की dismissal was a big one. ठीक है, you had democracy come back after such a long time. 2 साल के अंदर आपने उनको dismiss कर दिया. And जो historically, at least now over the past 30 years, जो हमने एक and some justified, attributes PPP पे डाले हैं. I mean, that 2 years was a government that was honestly at work. ठीक है ना? जब वो dismiss हो गई, एक तो some of it was gendered, some of it was also due to her, father, due to fears of those things, due to के जरा गोरा वर्ल्ड व्यू भी है उसका. लेकिन एक एक और ये भी था कि if you think about it कि जो फिर इसकी हुकूमत वापस आई 93 में 92 में, it was a bit different because that dismissal had taught them some lessons. You know, trusting the system on its own is not sufficient.
Not gonna.
उसमें जरदारी भाई का भी रोल बढ़ गया. ठीक है ना? Things change. So if I often wonder that was an interesting inflection point on our way back to democracy, and if we had allowed it to sustain its full 5 years. And the interesting, I guess, the other thing जो मुझे बहुत interesting लगी थी वो ये है कि is that एक दफा बेनज़ीर भी दुबई में थी, नवाज शरीफ was in Saudi. इन दोनों को तब एहसास हुआ कि यार ये हमने बुरा किया एक दूसरे के साथ, right? And this Charter of Democracy was a very interesting document कि यार we just respect mandates. ठीक है, अगर कोई बॉयज से किसी ने हमें कुछ ऑफर कर दी, ये नहीं करेंगे. They didn't follow it fully, but relatively, I mean, I hope now कि even now when I see कि अब इमरान खान के साथ इतना बड़ा सडन रिवर्सल हुआ है कि वो भी सोचे कि यार ठीक है मुझे ये लोग बुरे लगते हैं, but I need to reach out कि यार let's at least agree on the rules of the game. That's important for this country.
So you obviously are a firm believer in democracy, and so are so many other in this country. लेकिन फिर हम देखते हैं कि इतने divisiveness है, इतने extreme views हैं, और honestly maybe a lot of actually a majority subscribes to those views. आप religious angle से अगर देखें, आप interpretation देखें religion की, तो वो बड़ी extreme majority की नजर आती है. Is that a true assessment, और फिर वो उसका क्या होगा फसी?
So I think this is a hard one because I think the fear is a legitimate fear. ठीक है कि on average some things that maybe people of Pakistan didn't believe in the 70s, they were far more open, accommodating. They're less so now. And I think one of the things that has really put people into, I mean, a reflective mode is that there's so many incidents of mob justice. And उसमें इतनी ज़्यादती हो जाती है कि why don't people find it to be wrong? And I think कि जो आप कह रहे हैं कि look, the vote has relatively been fair. ठीक है ना कि अगर it's been fair and obviously not fair. We know where rigging होती है and all that, but historically religious parties have not gotten the vote. ठीक है ना? We've had a surge in support for the TLP electorally. They are on popular issues, ठीक है ना? And the mindset has changed. ठीक है, blasphemy is something that people are willing to vote on now. लेकिन I do not believe, देखें इसमें जो fear है और इसमें जो मेरा भी fear है कि if you are progressive and to the left, लेकिन आपने ये एक्सट्रीमिज्म का फियर इतना बड़ा कर दिया अपने जहन में कि you do things like France is doing. You become functionally illiberal in a way that there is no way to defend what that is, that's happening. उसमें से, okay, let's say the question is, can you wear a burqa truly of your own choice? I believe you can. ठीक है ना? I believe there are women who are forced into it. I believe the choice for many people is not one, but to say that कि नहीं आप कर ही नहीं सकते, ठीक है ना? There are so many choices where we forego things we want for something larger that we believe in. I mean, taxes is one of them. some people believe they're willing to give up their income just to ensure that there is parity or more equality in society. ठीक है? So
Right.
while that's not the burqa, it's also a form of self-sacrifice. ठीक है ना? People are willing to give up parts of their freedoms to ensure security जब crime बढ़ जाता है. So I'm just saying is that ये जो fear है of religious extremism, I agree it's a legitimate issue, लेकिन इसका जो sometimes reaction होता है कि यार इसे दबा कैसे सकते हैं. दबाना एक चीज़ है, but if you engage with it at some level, obviously some of these groups are not willing to engage. But the other thing is that the way we also have to look at it is not necessarily create new laws, लेकिन existing laws we've seen बिल्कुल रियासत जो है ना वो हाथ खड़ा कर दी थी, ये लोग आगे बस ये अब बैठेंगे, right? That needs to be worked on. इसमें I think there's a big issue, and I think fundamentally I've often thought about this. The biggest issue in my mind is that post sort of like the jihad incorporation of Pakistan in the 80s.
Yeah.
Ek idea, I mean, there were many ideas that were seeded, but the one idea that I think has become most problematic for Pakistan, and this is almost a religious jurisprudence issue, is that Pakistan mein, in order to help create militias for Afghanistan against the Soviet onslaught, and then subsequently when it was, you know, geared towards India, and then once again back to Afghanistan, उनमें से जनरल पॉपुलेशन में एक आइडिया सीड हो गई थी कि जिहाद इज एटमाइज्ड, व्हिच मींस इज दैट यू एंड मी कैन डिसाइड कि जिहाद का टारगेट कौन है. इसमें रियासत का रोल ही खत्म हो गया. Whereas there is in religion the idea that jihad is actually sanctioned by the state. और प्रॉब्लम यही है कि when you grow militias and you atomize the responsibility for who the target can be declared as, that is why हमारी रियासत जो है is finding it so difficult. That is why sometimes like when you send the police to face off with the TLP, कुछ police officers उनके साथ बैठ जाते हैं because they think कि यार they can also declare jihad, right? And I know that the state has been trying for at least 5 to 10 years now to reverse this thing, but like ये जो central ideas है, for example, again ये जो एक लिहाज से fear mongering है, again some of it is genuinely legitimate, but the question is that what anchors these fears. In the case of blasphemy again, if you look at the way that blasphemy argument is now sort of organically seeded in this country by certain groups, उनका ये है कि यार ये issue इतना emotional है कि इसमें कुछ हो नहीं सकता, बंदा कुछ कर लेगा. And this is even seeded in Western law, by the way, कि in the case where intimate partner violence है कुछ ममालिक में, there is a little bit of seed कि यार वो jealous हो गया, वो affair था, वो ये था, right? उसमें थोड़ा बहुत आपको you get a little bit of a lighter sentence. Here यही चीज push गई है. But on the other hand, on Islam, within Islam, actually the rules of evidence are really strict. ठीक है ना? It doesn't cut the mustard to say कि यार किसी ने कहा कि इसने कहा था और फिर मैं जो ना मैंने तहकीक नहीं किया, मैं चले गया मार गया. But it just will not cut the mustard. But you have groups that have chosen to, अच्छा उसमें एक और भी है, is that even though if we agree that the punishment is exactly this, you also give that person a chance, because ultimately what do you want? You want a moment, right? You want one more in the ranks. You give him a chance to renounce. फिर उसने किया, फिर वो punishment आती है. लेकिन इन्होंने ऐसे engender कर दिया है कि ये चीज़ ऐसी हो गई है कि that the Muslim male is fundamentally and functionally incapable of rational thought. और ये groups within Pakistan have promoted this because it allows one to engender street power. It also gets people to give up their rational senses whenever they're being preached to by a figure of authority. that goes into hate speech. So ये सवालात जो है ना, I think we can still address these. Because like even when you go into religion, you find that there is no way this is justified. और ये trends जो है, ये Pakistan was not born with this.
True.
Certain choices Pakistan made has now filtered down into society. And just as an idea was seeded, new ideas have to be seeded again. और इसमें time लगेगा, लेकिन ये हो सकता है.
Okay. Challenge, let's make the mood light a little bit. And I don't know if this is actually going to do that or not. But मैं बात करना चाह रहा था कि आजकल जो है, do you think humor और satire मुश्किल हो गया है ज़्यादा?
बहुत मुश्किल हो गया है. There are two reasons for this. एक reason ये है कि if you looked at satire and humor 10-15 years ago, your target was always somebody stronger than you, right? It was a president, America में भी है, it was, groups that had power. And in a way, when you said something, it was a little noble because you were actually punching up. You were punching up towards people who were stronger. पूरी दुनिया में, and even in Pakistan, problem ये हो गया is that you now have masses of people who are relatively ill-informed and who are also underprivileged. They've become powerful. And so when you actually joke about them in one way, you're punching down. And there is a paradox that's happening. So अगर आप देखें अमेरिका में, you have a certain kind of person electing Trump, ठीक है ना, and he's enacting laws or he's conducting discrimination on their behalf. लेकिन जब आप उस बंदे को देखते हैं जो ट्रम्प को वोट करता है, उसके हालात तो बहुत खराब है, right? He's not some evil privileged guy, which was what you could say maybe 10-15 years ago. And ये paradox आ गई in satire is how do you find a way to actually do it without actually not becoming a bully who's looking at privilege in the wrong way. एक ये है. दूसरा ये है कि एक तो sometimes it takes a lot of time to craft jokes and ये जो cycle बहुत short हो गई है. Like you sometimes you've got 15 minutes to write something and all that.
Right.
और उसमें बहुत बड़ी बोंगी भी आदमी लिख लेता है and all that. So it's become tougher. And also in Pakistan के उस लिहाज से you can't do it because they're not investing. The TV channels are also under pressure economically. So I mean I'd imagine हाँ एक और भी ये भी है कि there was more confidence in how you wrote things before because critic एक हफ्ता बाद उसका आर्टिकल छपता था to really आप चाकू चला दें. अब तो within minutes, right, आ जाता है एक से एक, right? And generally a troll is much more motivated than somebody who appreciated something.
But Fasi, you would agree that ageism, colorism, body features, हम तो इसके ऊपर मजाक सुनते रहे. PTV जैसे इंस्टीट्यूशन के ऊपर जो इतना कंजर्वेटिव है, उसके ऊपर भी मजाक होता था. Ethnicities, jokes हैं, certain communities के बारे में, gender के ऊपर jokes हैं. अब you think people have become more sort of edgy and more sort of prickly when somebody is trying to create humor because आप कहीं तो जाकर करेंगे ना tickle.
So I mean that is so I think there is some progress. देखें even if you looked at BBC in the 70s, especially PTV up to maybe all the way to the late 80s, stuttering was viewed as something that is kosher for humor.
Right.
And they used stutterers as people who would, because of pauses in the sentences, would say either sexual innuendos or something else. And ab nazar aata hai ki this is a condition that is devastating for a person.
True.
And it is not
nothing to joke about. Yeah.
And I've seen progress in Pakistan. They don't want to make jokes about that. In many other areas, there are populations that are very close when they look at gendered language and things like that. So I think there is progress, and this is one of those things जहाँ historical हमारे जो liberties थी, which by the way was not present just in Pakistan but it's around the world, people are re-evaluating. इसमें I think the interesting thing is कि is that a lot of power has gone to the audience now, and sometimes that power is also abused. You see, the thing about comedy is कि ultimately थोड़ा बहुत license आपको देना पड़ता है. And I'll tell you one thing that I find interesting. Like, it has divided the world, and it's kind of an intelligent debate, and it's not easy to have an answer for. आपने डेव शपेल का सुना होगा, ठीक है ना? 2-3-4 साल से he has an issue going on with the trans community because he's not as sensitive. Even though he's probably an ally, but he's not as sensitive. He says, I have the right to make jokes. But when you hear his fundamental objection, I find that something really fascinating. वो कहता है कि 200 साल से मेरे लोग जो है ना, they've been enslaved. 200 साल से I can't go out in the same way. I feel unsafe. The police don't treat me right. और आपने इस ग्रुप को 5 साल में इतने सारे protections दे दिए, ठीक है? Because it started off from being predominantly a white issue that's for a white subset of a minority. And you know, so his argument is literally कि why should I give this protection जो आपने हमें नहीं दिया, right? And so the interesting thing there is, like, this is probably another thing is also is that what is your degree of deprivation? ठीक है ना? And why do societies choose to address some over others? And then is that not a question that you
to
can
be
actually
asked,
make fun of?
yeah.
And also to be asked, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think इसमें जो है is it's a legitimate thing. I think comedy as a result is going through a severe transition where new values, so the interesting thing is new concerns have been identified, but new values are not exactly set in stone yet. Like एक ज़माने में, like there was this joke and I forget who made this joke, and I found it to be really interesting because the thing about comedy is that if you can work around paradoxes, that's what makes it intelligent and at least have purpose. So ये जो Caitlyn Jenner, so when she first transitioned, and so it was at some award ceremony, I was just listening to the joke and I loved it. I said, Caitlyn Jenner has done a lot for, you know, shining a light on trans issues, but it's done very little for women drivers because उसने एक accident किया था caused, you know, and in America में, this is interesting, they have around driving 2 prejudices, which one is shared in Pakistan and one we don't have, which is that women drivers aren't great and Asian drivers, ये East Asian drivers. For some reason, ठीक है, ये उनके बारे में
एक वो है बनाओ.
हाँ, एक है. And the nature of prejudice is also interesting in some ways. Like America में एक prejudice है that women can't code because there's a massive amount of disparity between the numbers of women who get into coding and computer science and men. अच्छा, पाकिस्तान में ये नहीं है. If you go to a computer science department here, it's almost at parity, or maybe some cases even women are more. Yeah. And so it's just, I guess the answer to your question in some ways is difficult because I think there's a transitory period. People, I think audiences have become more powerful than they have historically. And sometimes I think that power is used in excess because without license to the comedian to slightly offend. देखिए, absolute prejudice, obviously, वो तो you didn't need to have woke culture for that. वो तो 20 साल पहले भी लोग उस पे गुस्सा होते थे. लेकिन अब जो है ना, वो बहुत ज़्यादा extreme हो गया है because kabhi na kabhi, somebody says I'm triggered over what, and we're like, is cheez pe kharish mujhe hui hai. Like sometimes it just becomes, in a way, too sensitive to deal with. But by and large, it's also a good thing because it's made people more aware.
So what's your verdict on the Oscars episode, the Will Smith episode?
अच्छा, उसमें तो मैं बिल्कुल खिलाफ हूँ थप्पड़ की, right? I mean, look at the ego of the man. He presumes everyone knows his wife's medical condition. ठीक है ना? किसको पता है? GI Jane, ठीक है ना? That is such a massive ego. दूसरा ये है कि there are so many women over the past 40 years who've shaved their heads as fashion statements. इसको क्या पता लगता है? ठीक है ना? And secondly, I think even let's say if it was a joke that was, I mean, GI Jane for its time was a massively iconic figure. जब उसने सर शेव किया था in the film was an act of defiance. It was actually a woman making space in a man's world. So when I saw,
what happened,
I just thought कि यार कि अगर threshold for violence अब इतना गिर गया है, ठीक है ना? ये तो फिर there's no way you can run society on this. Or so, and secondly, so I don't know. I mean, alopecia is obviously it's not a comfortable condition. It's a painful thing. सब कुछ, लेकिन I still don't think कि ये
justified था reaction
at all. हाँ, at all.
अच्छा.
I mean, I'll tell you another thing, right? Tell me who won which Oscar. ठीक है ना? Nobody remembers anything. I mean, this is a guy who took some people जो ने 2-3 साल फिल्मों पे लगाए हैं. They were huge achievements. Like इसने Coda won a film, ठीक है? Coda for the deaf community was massive. Nobody cares. ठीक है ना? आज भी सवाल ही. I mean, the other question should have been that Dune won so many awards, but was it, a film that deserved a narrative award as well? ठीक है ना? मुझे तो बहुत पसंद थी वो film. And now I don't know कि कितने. So I don't know. I think. और दूसरा ये है कि ये मेरा एक this is probably my personality fault, लेकिन इतने बड़े elites, ठीक है ना? I think with the amount of privileges they have, they can brush off 1-2 slides here and there. ठीक है ना? He'll still go back to a massive house, a massive swimming pool. ठीक है ना? बंदे को बाद में, you should learn from Pakistan. ठीक है? Thing happens, फिर सड़क पे आदमी कर लेता है, and then there's enough people to separate and all that.
So that segues very well into my next question, which is about, this new phenomena of social media. ये हम जो एक देख रहे हैं, now everyone feels empowered कि वो लिख सकते हैं, वो comment कर सकते हैं, access भी है, और anonymous भी रह सकते हैं, उनको उन तक पहुंचा नहीं जा सकता उस तरह, उस वक्त उनको physically interact नहीं किया जा सकता उनके साथ. तो क्या देखते हैं आप लोगों के अभी behaviors कहाँ पहुंचे हैं, बेहतरी की तरफ जा रहे हैं, या do we still need to continue working on it? Because I'm sure you get a lot of trolling. आपको बहुत कुछ सुनने को मिलता होगा, क्योंकि स्क्रीन के पीछे से बैठ के वो बहुत कुछ कह सकते हैं.
तो I mean, I think I don't think there's that much progress on this yet, and I think it's a problem that exists around the world. And in some ways, I also think that your online behavior is a reflection of offline problems. Okay, why do you feel you can't say what you believe under your own name? Yeah, why do you feel you need to act out in a certain way? I mean, I'll give you an example, and I found this fascinating. There used to be this account that used to, हर जो भी मैं लिखता था, अच्छी गलत बात जो भी है ना, कोई साड़ने वाली बात उसके नीचे लिखता था, right? always angry, whatever. Acha, then once I posted a job opening, so he wrote me a letter, hey, I'd like to apply for this and work with you. So, ठीक है ना? ठीक है? And I put his name in the pool. ठीक है ना? वो नहीं हुआ. But I found it interesting. Okay, also for some people, even to this day, they see their offline presence as a no consequence zone, as a area where maybe the people that are appearing on screen are actually not real human beings. So there's partly that. दूसरा ये भी है कि I think offline values are also what drive your online behavior. तो उसमें हम जितना भी सोशल मीडिया को कंट्रोल करें कुछ फर्क नहीं. Right? If you believe certain groups of people have to die and have no right to exist, if you believe that your political agenda is the only political agenda and everyone else is a sellout, a gaddar or whatever, तो उसका the way of engaging is in this form. Like certain values and beliefs for which trolling या extreme behavior is the only output. If you believe कि let's say ये बंदा जो है ना ये स्माइली है या शिया है या ये whatever he is, these people have no right to exist, yeah, that their existence is for a ideology or a offshoot that is harming the overall ummah. तो वो तो आदाब से बात तो नहीं करेगा फिर, वो तो यही करेगा जो यहाँ करते हैं. The really other interesting thing is that every so often you meet an online adversary in real life. ठीक है ना? वो इतने polite होते हैं, ये होते हैं, and sometimes they're really nervous also because they never imagined कि offline world में भी interaction हो सकती है.
हो जाएगा.
And then they change also. So I mean, I think one of the problems is that it's also in the life of societies or humanity, 7-8 साल कुछ नहीं होते. Maybe we will organically see a change in the next 10 years. Like एक चीज जो मैं सब young लोगों को बताता हूँ.
Please.
कि when we were young, we said a lot of stupid things. We believed a lot of really dumb shit. लेकिन शुक्र है सोशल मीडिया नहीं था. So only जो हमारे दोस्त अहबाब है उन जमाने के दे नो कि हम कितने वो थे. And now I tell them, I said like that, now unfortunately the memory is forever. ये वो तो थोड़ा बहुत hold back at least on your personal life. Don't discuss that. Don't discuss a few other things because eventually now I mean for any job they'll do a quick search of your social media. और वहाँ पे अगर तुम कह रहे हो कि फलाने को लटका दो या जॉर्डन पीटरसन आज कह रहे हैं कि औरतों के साथ ये हो जाए वो हो जाए, it becomes a problem. And again it comes back to my initial point is they still see the online world as consequence free.
अच्छा चले अब थोड़ी सी बात करते हैं म्यूजिक की. I know that you have been involved with music. आप उसके ऊपर बात भी करते हैं. You have a very particular sort of genre of music that you like. तो बताइए क्या है फसी ज़का का म्यूजिक क्या है? अभी आपकी मैं देख रहा था कि you have a 24-hour playlist that you have put together. So tell us about that playlist. क्या है उसके अंदर?
तो वो जो है, I mean honestly it's just songs I like and I started putting it together जब से ये Spotify आया. I've loved it कि उसमें वो होता है my वो जो I mean now it's at 29 hours. I'm really happy कि अभी लगा सकते हैं. I can play it and every song that comes I like. So I've put in the classics. I put in the classics of pop. I put in the best of the 2010s, where I'm slightly shy of having the right number of materials is this sort of new wave music that has emerged in the past 4-5 years. वो उसमें कम है, and that I'm like trying to catch up to listen. उसमें problem ये है कि like some of the new rap music जो है I don't like, and
अच्छा
uska ye hai कि is actually, I mean, there are a couple like Faris Shafi, which I think is phenomenal. I think the lyrics are phenomenal. But I also like it partly because there is a rhythmic structure. ये एक form of rap है which I guess which is more laconic in its delivery. It is arrhythmical. It doesn't have the same kind of like initially जो rap निकला था was very beat oriented. ठीक है कि delivery ऐसी, and now I just don't enjoy that, and that is really popular these days.
हम्म
और फिर आज का एक sort of, I guess the wrong word would be is it's a mixture of dance and R&B, high falsetto voices,
हम्म
ठीक है ना, which is the new pop. वो भी I don't enjoy. So I finally aged out of being current
right
with taste. And it's a terrible thing to do. I thought I'd never be in that position, but I'm in that position. ठीक है, और तो ये जो प्लेलिस्ट है, I mean, I joke about this, but I'm really happy कि आज मैं मर गया, मैं कहता हूँ कि बस ये मैंने छोड़ दिया है पाकिस्तान के लिए, ठीक है ना,
nice
कि मैंने क्यूरेट कर दिया है ये एक चीज़, but it's actually very deficient in sort of some contemporary वो, और दूसरा ये भी है कि I'm a huge rock guy, ठीक है ना, I never thought it was possible, but rock is dead, ठीक है ना, you show young kids, I talk to them 18, 19, ठीक है ना, they view it so distastefully. And like you try to explain, and it's interesting is कि a lot of rock is also not great music, ठीक है ना, वो जो 80s का वो एक rock star lifestyle, they were very predictable songs, things like that. और मुझे अंदाज़ हो गया कि ये बस मुझे पसंद है. I like hair metal, I like that ridiculous. In fact, one of my favorite films is This Is Spinal Tap.
all right
I don't know if you've seen it. Rob
no I
Reiner
haven't
की
but
film है.
yeah
I mean, it shows all the excesses and the idiocy of rock and metal, and I find it funny because I actually enjoy that excess and idiocy and वो. So I mean, I just think uh, like I love music. I listen to a lot of it every day. लेकिन I have finally aged out. कि
अच्छा
वो
फसी
जो
एक कंट्रोवर्शियल सवाल पूछूंगा मुझे
हाँ
बताइए कि ये जो brands हैं do they bring value to music? Are they making music more accessible to common man, or do you think they are um, sort of driving and limiting creativity? Do you
I,
get what I mean?
yeah. I mean, I think जब मैं म्यूजिक पे लिखता था, I was hugely against the role of brands because with brands only know what has historically worked. And because they know what's historically worked, they will ask you to make a variation of what exists. And with that, creativity khatam ho jati hai. And then the other thing is that brands also don't want you to experiment lest anything becomes controversial, whether it's an opinion or whatever. So there is a constricting effect of brands. However, now I'm in favor of brands, and the reason is that देखिए एक तो जब से ये CDs और ये file sharing आई है, there's a massive income stream that these guys don't get. Spotify is, I think, the industry is probably slow to adapt, but it is an extremely expropriating system. They get very little money out of it. And then पाकिस्तान में जब 2008 से 2013 में पब्लिक स्पेस खत्म हो गई थी,
Hmm.
इंसर्जेंसी ऐसी थी कि लोग तो बाहर खाने के लिए भी गए थे. You didn't know उसमें one of the big things was that कि म्यूजिक कभी सीन खत्म हो गया. There was, I mean, just up to from 2001 to 2007 कितने bands आए थे. The music system, the music scene was so flush with options and differences. Mostly it constrained. And if you look at between 2013 and 20 till now, actually, what we have left is dinosaurs. New stars are not minted at the same rate. because people are going for what's familiar, and partly without these corporations right now, I don't see how the system can stay
Hmm.
afloat.
Hmm.
If you look at Coke Studio, even if you look at Kashmir, or if you look at Pepsi, if you look at even Velo, without them, music programming TV पे आते ही ना, the incentive is gone. वो and जो music के channels रह गए, they are not attracting advertising dollar at the rate that is required.
Hmm.
So I think they have a pernicious effect, but actually overall now they're allowing things to continue, that there is still an interest in music, that music is produced, or and and I have to say, like I'm a huge fan जो इस साल कोक स्टूडियो ने किया है,
अच्छा.
जो जुल्फी ने किया है. लाइक मैं तो 7 साल से मैंने देखा ही नहीं है. मैंने कहा ठीक है, लाइक आई कुड हैव इमेजिन्ड कोक स्टूडियोज आस्किंग पीपल तेरे साथ पुराने कैसेट है, लेकिन फाइंडिंग कैसेट्स की कोई गाना निकले इसको. इट गॉट बोरिंग आफ्टर अ व्हाइल. ये जो इन्होंने किया है, आई रियली एंजॉयड इट. लाइक आई थॉट इट वाज डिफरेंट. Even songs that I've aged out of, like Piche Hut, eventually I started to enjoy it. I saw its artistic merit. ये Aruj Aftab का जो गाना था, a number of others. So, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say all of the songs were absolutely brilliant, but it was sufficient to make things exciting. मैं तो हर साल पेप्सी बैटल ऑफ बैंड्स का इंतज़ार करता हूँ. दैट्स माय फेवरेट शो. मुझे आई लव लुकिंग एट बैंड्स, आई लव लुक एट द इंटरेक्शन, उसमें क्रिएटिविटी क्या आती है. एंड इट्स वन ऑफ द फ्यू शोज जो आई थिंक देव गॉट अ गुड मिक्स ऑफ जजेस, एंड द रियल टेस्ट ऑफ दीज शोज इज कैन यू गेट एंग्री एट अ जज.
इंटरेस्टिंग.
तो कभी ना कभी कोई कुछ कह देता है, वो मुझे गुस्सा आ जाता है कि ये इन्होंने क्या किया, दिस बैंड डिजर्व्स मोर एंड व्हाटएवर. तो आई मीन, So I agree with the fundamental problem of sponsorships, basically creating a very narrow worldview, and I think Coke Studio exemplified this. It's something that was new once. उन्होंने इतना घसीटा उस process को till everyone was like बस भाई और मत करें. And now finally, like they've embraced total change, and I think Zulfi did a phenomenal job.
Right. अच्छा, मुझे बताइए, ये बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग हुआ कि उरूज आफ्ताब को भी एकदम से लोगों ने देखा, और ग्रैमी और ओबामा, और उसके बाद फिर एवरीबॉडी नोटिस्ड. तो अब आर्टिस्ट के लिए जो है वो ये endorsement from an elite perspective, an informed perspective, वो जरूरी हो गया है, क्योंकि वो हमारा पॉपुलर कल्चर मुझे लगता है कहीं रह गया. जो हमारा लॉलीवुड था, जो हमारा फोक म्यूजिक था, अब हमें कितना प्योर फोक म्यूजिक, कितने पठाने खान, कितनी नजर आते हैं. उसकी पैकेजिंग बहुत ज्यादा हो गई है, उसके अंदर ग्लॉस बहुत आ गया है. और अताउल्ला भी अब कोक स्टूडियो में आकर जब गाते हैं तो वो वैसा साउंड नहीं करते जैसा वो ट्रक ड्राइवर सुना करता था.
I mean, I think that's really interesting. और इसमें I have a few, I guess, unpopular opinions, because I'm not as invested as other people in this particular. वो मैं पश्तो music. I'll start with पश्तो music, right? मैं दोस्तों को कहता हूँ, I'll tell you a story. मैंने अपने घर पे I have a really good sound system, and it is geared to bringing out the sound exactly as the musician intended.
Okay.
Because एक तो ये प्रॉब्लम होता है कि जो हम फोन पे सुनते हैं, जो ये छोटे मोटे स्पीकरों पे सुनते हैं, उसमें थोड़ी सा सिग्नल प्रोसेसिंग वो करते हैं, so that highlights the bass or whatever. It doesn't sound the way. सर यहाँ वो हम बैठे थे और उसमें बात हो रही थी, तो in Pashto music I love the lyrics, but हमारा जो एक almost melodic standard है, ठीक है ना, मैं तंग आ गया हूँ. मैं कहा I need it to sound different, right? I can't वो दोस्त जो है ना वो कहते ये तुम क्या कह रहे हो, this is against our culture. मैं कहा नहीं यार, अब हमें कुछ करना चाहिए. And I've seen a couple of guys do it. There's a guy called Bilawal Sayyid. There's Pakhtun core, there's a sort of rap band and all that, and and then there's also a sound जो आप कह रहे हैं, like you know, Coke Studio is like अगर आपने पुराने cassettes हम निकालें, we feel that they sound a bit warm, लेकिन उसमें distortion और background में एक hiss सा भी होता है, ये
हाँ,
होता है.
हाँ,
Partly we got used to it, ठीक है ना, that this is how it should sound. But actually, I mean, if you actually record it a bit more professionally, it doesn't sound that way. और ये है कि I think we have to, at some level, come to accept कि वो जो classical music है, ये एक niche product बनेगा. इतने attention spans are shorter. I mean, I'll give you a really interesting thing. देखें, अगर आपको, I actually really admire people who enjoy Pakistani classical. I feel they are people who can sit down and they wait for the payoff.
And you have a lot of Mehdi Hasan and in your you know
मुझे तो बहुत पसंद है.
list,
हाँ,
बिल्कुल.
हाँ, but also, but with classical, like जो बहुत ज़्यादा सुनते हैं, ठीक है ना, गज़ल सुनते हैं, ये वो, they're like waiting और एक payoff आ जाता है at one point during the song and all that. Nowadays, if you look at worldwide music, हम जो एक chorus होता था,
हाँ,
गाने के 1.5 मिनट के बाद आता है, वो अब बहुत ज़्यादा पहले 20 सेकंड में आ जाता है. It's really unusual. एक गाना है एवा मैक्स का स्वीट बट साइको, मुझे बहुत पसंद है.
okay.
उसका chorus opener है. And one of the reasons for that is that Spotify will count a listen if somebody listens for 30 seconds. So what they do is the chorus is always the most catchy part, वो बिल्कुल beginning में डाल देते हैं.
शुरू में डाल दे.
Right? So technology, incentives, they all change music. Music never remains. So I mean, my belief is कि we're going to have to, we can't bemoan कि अब classical वो चीज़ नहीं रही, या people are not appreciating them कि ये jean jacket jogger में नहीं है, ठीक है ना, ये this is like I have made peace with कि अब
अच्छा.
rock is for old fuddy duddies, ठीक है
ठीक
ना.
है.
तो
So the
जो
sooner
हमारे
you get over that, the better for you
ज़्यादा
as a
कि मैं आपको भी कहता हूँ, ठीक है ना, कबूल करना होगा कि बस वो टाइम गया, ठीक है ना. तो वो एक नैरो सा उसका बैंडविड्थ बन जाएगा. एंड but the important thing is to be able to also support that, because these are indigenous forms of music. They also deserve support from the state. ये आपके लिए कॉर्पोरेशन उस तरह से नहीं करेगा. Which although I think it's interesting, Coke Studio does deserve credit for. They mind some of those for a new generation. Old generation doesn't like how it sounds.
Yeah.
But what it has done for actually helping continue that music is significant, because there's a whole new generation who's at least willing to listen and maybe develop that taste. तो ये जो बस यही होता है कि like, you know, art forms and their purity, and ensuring their purity also ensures their decline. Unfortunately, you will have to bastardize it to some level, because लोग जब 20 साल बाद या 10 years बाद जब वो पैदा होते हैं, it's a different world.
It's a different world.
And उसमें we all who love an art form in a certain way, we all, by the way, go kicking and screaming. You guys are not intelligent. जब तुम लोगों को अदरक का क्या पता है, तुम
तमीज़ नहीं है.
right? It's inevitable. मुझे याद है जब ये जब ये जुनून बहुत हाइट पे था, या ये आतिफ असलम, like somebody whose voice I love is Tina Sani. And she said some very disparaging things about these guys. Because उसके सामने भी यही हो रहा था कि look, we were elevated at this level, अब ये छोकरियां आ गए हैं, ठीक है ना, इन्होंने कुछ, हमने तो 7 साल सीखा before we even dared to sing in front of someone, ये डायरेक्ट निकल के आ जाते हैं. But that's it, things change.
And it's so interesting to see now, you know, somebody like Atif is also experimenting with rap or wo, because there's no way around it. Matlab,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I agree. I mean, unless you go into it, and मैं खुद बहुत सी चीज़ों में purist हूँ, and लेकिन to some degree, I've just, I had to make peace with it. कि बस
So
ठीक है.
so चाहे आप पॉलिटिक्स को देखें, चाहे आप कल्चर को देखें, चाहे आप आर्ट को देखें, everything has to change and evolve and grow.
Yes, and the interesting thing is, I think also the choices we make today will determine what culture is tomorrow, right? अगर 20 साल पहले, let's say in the 90s, if there was somebody at the helm of Lok Virsa or the Department of Culture, they should have realized there and then that pop is going to overtake, rock is going to overtake, and that जो हमारे indigenous cultural artifacts या practices है, तो ये जो सारे घराने थे म्यूजिक के, then at that point they deserved financial support to ensure the art form did not die. At that point, then we would have had a richer ecosystem today. If ये एक लिहाज से like we're losing traditional ways of making blocks and prints, लेकिन अगर लोग नहीं लेते, the only way countries have allowed them to go forward is that you invest in ensuring that this continues. I remember I was doing a program way around 2007-06, और यही जो ये people who sing at weddings and whatever, they were also a source of culture. अच्छा, उनमें तबाही आ गई, and तबाही इसलिए आ गई because ये जो DJ turntables and the mics had become really cheap, and then also what happened is that the culture changed. Is first you had other people celebrate for you, other people would dance for you, other people would sing for you, and now people were okay with doing it themselves, and it was tragic to see कि उनकी incomes कितनी गिर गई, and they're all doing other things now. But the thing is कि like you have to make a choice very early on. Do I need to preserve this? Because the market will not preserve it. The market is ahistorical unless history makes money, unless you do it the way Coke did it, right? Unless कुछ और आ जाए, तो उसमें I think it's. Have you ever been to Sri Lanka?
No, I haven't. That's one country. It's on my list, but I haven't been to Sri Lanka yet.
So I've been 6-7 times. I love Sri Lanka. ठीक है, सस्ता भी है, लेकिन what I love about Sri Lanka is कि they've engendered in their people. आप सड़क पे वॉक करो, ये क्या है, वो क्या कि यार ये 1627 में फलाना आया था, फिर ये होगा, फिर ये, like random person, no education. They love their culture. They're looking to preserve it. ठीक है ना? और पाकिस्तान में like this government, which actually did a good thing, was seeking to preserve culture and promoting tourism. लेकिन वो state अकेला कर नहीं सकता, right? When you have a tourist come to Texla, he doesn't need to just have a tour guide. He needs to have people who love what was or whatever. और हमारा unfortunately to a degree is that post 1970, actually 1980, is that we've tried to present a different, almost fictionalized history. Then this would require us to support the Buddhists who were here 700 years ago, who had amazing achievements in sanitation and city design and all that. लेकिन वो तो नहीं है लोगों में.
And the Sikh rule in Punjab, you know.
Exactly, ठीक है ना, कि वो
Ranjit Singh,
रंजीत, तो ये सारे, ठीक है ना, you're gonna have to be much more open-minded on this. So I think we've also lost the boat on some of those things. के हारून जो है ना, वो अपने LPs और ये प्रोटेक्ट करे, बिकॉज और कोई नहीं करने वाला आपके लिए. ये गाने अब ऐसे नहीं बनेंगे, और बस यही जो बन गए.
Good. I guess I'll also have to come to terms like you have, कि वो जैसे आपने रॉक के साथ रिकंसाइल कर लिया कि अब वो नहीं होगा वैसा, तो I'll also have to get to come to terms with the fact कि वो टीना सानी मेरे लिए तो शायद इतनी इम्पोर्टेंट रहेंगी, लेकिन शायद मेरे बच्चों के लिए अब वो जो है वो उस तरह the magic will never be the same again.
यही you'll tell your बच्चे कि यार तुम लोग क्या जानवर हो, ठीक है, मैंने तुम लोगों की पोटियां साफ की है, ये किया वो किया, और तुम में इतना भी कल्चर नहीं है कि ये गाना आपको पसंद आए. ये हिस्टोरिकली यार 10 साल 15 साल यही माँ बाप के साथ होता है कि यार ये तो दे लाइक दिस, लाइक आई यूज्ड टू एंजॉय इट के इन द 90s वो इसे शोर कहते थे, राइट?
बिल्कुल,
एंड इन
बिल्कुल।
सम वेज अब मैं भी जब कभी सुनता हूँ मैं कहता हूँ ये क्या शोर है, राइट? ये लाइक it just doesn't sort of compute in that way. But it's interesting. I mean, like Aruj Aftab has taken that
Yeah,
and
yeah.
mixed it around, and there's an audience for it.
हुँ, हुँ, हुँ। बिल्कुल।
आपने
और
वो बैंड कभी सुना है बयान?
जी, जी, बयान ऑफ कोर्स।
Right? I think that's really interesting. उनका जो
हाँ,
lead singer है,
हाँ।
he sounds really classically trained, and there's a very interesting fusion going on. I mean, I find his sound very interesting.
राइट, राइट। बिल्कुल। और
आपको ये बात अच्छी नहीं लगी
नहीं,
कि
नहीं,
एक
नहीं,
गाने से
आई
नहीं
एम विद यू।
जोड़ा जा सकता
नहीं, नहीं, आई एम विद यू।
है।
थैंक गॉड फॉर दोज़ साउंड्स, बिकॉज़ अगर वो भी नहीं होंगी तो हम बड़े फिर वो बिल्कुल एक ही तरह की आवाज़ें और एक ही तरह का स्टाइल, और फिर आई गेस वो होता भी है फसी, बिकॉज़ 90s और वो फिर वाइटल साइंस, जुनून जिस तरह आप कह रहे थे, वहाँ पे भी यही यही स्ट्रगल चल रही थी उस वक़्त भी, जिस तरह आपने कहा कि एक और दौर से गुज़र रहे थे। अब ये एक और दौर है जिसमें यंग स्टनर्स हैं, और अब मुझे तो बहुत सारों के नाम भी नहीं पता जो
हाँ
हमने अभी
हाँ
कोक स्टूडियो में भी देखे। वो वो हैं, और वो सुनने वाले भी उनके ज़्यादा हैं, पसंद कर रहे हैं उनको, और ज़्यादा सुनते हैं। हम तो म्यूज़िक कभी-कभी सुनते हैं, तो वो लोग
हाँ।
सुन रहे हैं और एन्जॉय कर रहे हैं। तो सो या times change, and tastes also evolve similarly.
I mean, I think there's one other thing. इसमें I got interested about 4 5 years ago. I so when we were younger, ठीक है ना, and you took any young boy of 15 16 के आपका ड्रीम क्या है, ठीक है ना, तो वो वही कहता है जीन जैकेट जॉगर, गाड़ी हो, वो एक डेक हो, राइट? एंड इफ यू आस्क समबडी टुडे, रफली वही चीज़ की गाड़ी हो, जीन जैकेट हो, डेक वो नहीं मांगते. So the interesting thing that's happened in the past 15 years, जब से ये MP3 आया था, most people don't realize is MP3 is a terrible format. It doesn't capture the richness of sound because उनका aim उस जमाने में ये था कि कितना कम space, because उस लिहाज से वो bandwidth नहीं exist करती थी 15
Hmm.
20 years ago.
Hmm.
And then people had because वो CD recording वो downscale करते थे. फिर ये हो गया कि फोन्स के अंदर आपकी म्यूजिक कैपेबिलिटी आ गई, ठीक है ना, फोन्स कैन एक्चुअली प्ले वेरी पुअर क्वालिटी म्यूजिक फॉर यू. फिर हम all the kids are listening to music with their headphones. And so what happened was that there's a whole generation who don't want a deck, who don't even know decks existed, कि उसमें 5 6 pieces होते थे, floor standard दो
Hmm.
होते थे. And actually I had become like that, but around 5 years ago I had bought a new pair of earphones और एक गाना है by Van Halen मैं सुन रहा था, और उसमें वो स्टेरियो पैनिंग इफेक्ट्स है कि एक साउंड यहाँ गए और एंड सडनली आई वाज रिमाइंडेड कि बचपन में हमारे घर में डेक था एंड द साउंड वाज सो फुल एंड मैसिव
Hmm.
एंड सो डिटेल्ड.
Hmm.
एंड देन आई गॉट बैक इनटू दिस.
Hmm.
फिर मैंने डिस्कवर किया कि यार अगर आपको सॉन्ग डाउनलोड करना है, इट हैज़ टू बी इन अ फ्लैट फॉर्मेट, इतना रेजोल्यूशन हो, इट साउंड्स इंटायरली डिफरेंट.
Hmm.
तो आई थिंक एक ये भी है कि this is a theory of mine, and I possibly am wrong, but लेकिन ये जो sort of the new rap, which is it's not as musical as it used to be. आप अगर सुने 20 25 years ago का rap, highly musical, highly rhythmic, and partly because that is very well reproduced on your earphone.
Hmm.
एक आवाज है, कहीं से एक टंग आ गया है, whatever, a very small synth in between, relax वो बोलते हैं and all that. So
So yeah, let's not fall back into nostalgia. लेकिन एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग चीज मुझे अभी रियलाइज हुई फसी, मुझे लगता है कि चाहे वो मीडिया हो, चाहे वो म्यूजिक हो, व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट सोशल मीडिया वर्सेस कन्वेंशनल मीडिया, तो मुझे लगता है हम थोड़े से आइसोलेशनिस्ट हो गए हैं. और वो जो अब जो टेक्नोलॉजी है जो कि आ गई है, वो भी लोगों को उसी तरफ लेकर जाती है। जिस तरह आपने बात की कि वो हमने ईयरफ़ोन्स लगा लिए और हम अपने आप को सॉर्ट ऑफ कर्टन ऑफ करते हैं। पहले इट यूज्ड टू बी an activity where other could engage with you. चाहे वो मीडिया था, you would sit together and watch TV. Now you're watching you on your own personal gadgets. इसी तरह म्यूजिक था जो कि आप जब प्ले करते थे तो लोग सुनते थे उसको, जो गुजर रहे हैं, जो जिन्होंने वो चूज नहीं भी किया, they could also become part of the experience. Now we want to keep our experiences very very personal, you know. हम तो शेयर भी नहीं करना चाहते, बताना भी नहीं चाहते कि हम क्या एक्सपीरियंस कर रहे हैं।
So, I mean, I think I agree with that fully. I think, जब VHS होता था, it was an event. You had to go to the store, you had to go through the things, you had to discuss with someone, ये कैसा है, ये है आपके पास, ये नहीं. So there was, um, the process was a bit more involved than it is now.
Engaging, you know, you had to engage with others. Yeah.
But I see two things. एक ये is what we call the paradox of choice. If you give somebody 3 choices, when he makes a choice, he's happy. If you give them infinite choices, whatever they choose, they're unhappy or not as happy by having less choice because they think they might still be missing out. So we've seen that in film and whatever. So I'll give you an example how this is playing out. If you look at the last 10 years of film, the biggest ones are remakes, yeah, sequels, yeah, things people are familiar with through comics. Why? Because as you technically have unlimited choices, you then gravitate to the familiar. The interesting thing is that, like, if you look at the top 100 musicians in Billboard over the past 10 years, वही 10 साल में से वही है. इतने उसमें नए entries नहीं है. And this is an effect of the paradox of choice. Is unlimited choices force you back to the familiar because you are no longer able to curate a meaningful experience. और उसमें दूसरा ये है कि then you look towards the most popular because that's the only thing you can socially discuss with somebody else. Because if you go into the minutia of कि ये गजल फलाने के disciple ने वहाँ की थी कराची में, ठीक है ना, nobody is going to have any feeling with you कि ये कोई, right? So then you'll only concentrate on the Tina Sanis or whatever. And तो ये जो paradox of choice है, it has created these effects. एक third चीज जो I believe in is also the self-help industry. ठीक है ना, what they've been pushing is कि we are people who should improve all the time. तो ये भी लगा लेते हैं, ये वो कोई पॉडकास्ट सुन रहे थे, कोई ये होता है कि at all times I should be doing something productive. And the beauty of creativity and your personal health and progress is कि Vela time is really important.
Yeah.
ठीक है ना, that you need to be able to have Vela time to engage with people because उसका एक और effect होता है आपकी personality पे, वो होता है. So I mean, I agree. I mean, I think these 3 things put together have created a form of incentives that some I don't think are as productive as intended to be. Like आजकल with some of my friends, we force ourselves कि हर 2 हफ्ते बाद यार we have to meet in person. And nobody wants to do it. Even I don't want to do it. But once we meet in person, it's something else.
You love it, yeah.
You love it. So वो करना होगा. I mean, I think it's interesting कि लोग make a lot of jokes about millennials कि यार ये नाकाम करते हैं या they have really high expectations and they don't gel in well. But part of it is a function of, this rapid explosion of technology. It's going to take another 10 years before parents realize कि यार बच्चों को मत स्क्रीन टाइम दे हर वक्त, बच्चों को some more controlled outside play, engaged play. They're doing it now anyway, but nowadays also the emphasis is again, how do I ensure every second of my child's time is somehow making him into the next स्टीव वॉज़नियाक या बिल गेट्स या व्हाटएवर,
हम्म।
एक्चुअली बच्चे को भी वेला टाइम देना चाहिए.
हाँ नहीं
You
नहीं,
know,
वो
he should
बिल्कुल,
be.
that's what I tell my kids and I tell my wife, क्योंकि बच्चे थोड़ी देर बाद आते हैं कि हम बोर हो रहे हैं, they have got so much to do, so much to cover, but still there are times when they'll come and tell you कि हम बोर हो रहे हैं. तो मैं कहता हूँ कोई बात नहीं, थोड़ी देर बोर हो जाओ, it's good. you would
I
you
think
would
it's excellent parenting. You
yeah,
need to give them time to get bored, to engage their imagination.
yeah,
Her kids directed now. They should hang off the sofa in an unusual
yeah,
fan. They should be jumping around, yeah, playing with their toys and imagining कि ये क्या चीज़ है
ये
वो
क्या
है.
चीज है. और बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
हाँ, and
एंड लर्न टू स्पेंड टाइम विद योरसेल्फ, बिकॉज आप हर वक्त इंगेज रहेंगे, तो फिर आप अपने साथ कब डायलॉग करेंगे, इनर डायलॉग कब होगा, कब आप चीजों को प्रोसेस करेंगे या उनसे कुछ निकालेंगे, बिकॉज यू आर ऑलवेज पार्ट ऑफ गेटिंग समथिंग, बट देन व्हेन आर यू एब्जॉर्बिंग इट एंड इंटरनलाइजिंग इट.
so I think that is fascinating, actually, what you've said. So I have a different word for it. मैं अक्सर कभी किसी से मिलता हूँ और मैं सोचता हूँ कि यार इसका inner monologue क्या होगा,
एग्जैक्टली.
right? Somebody who's just focused on career और या ये चीज़ है,
गैदरिंग
ये plot है,
material objects and
हाँ, ये
knowledge,
things
even
like that है.
knowledge for that matter.
हाँ,
वो भी हम कितना इकट्ठा कर लेंगे, उसको
कितना
एब्जॉर्ब भी
इकट्ठा
तो
कर.
करें, उसको उससे कुछ निकालें और कुछ निकालें, उसमें ग्रो भी तो करें.
हाँ, and secondly also that I agree with that absolutely, and also what is your opinion? You must have some opinion on the knowledge you've just gained.
राइट.
Because the real problem is like, so on the online space I find it fascinating is that sometimes you engage with people and you realize they don't know how the world works at all. And the nature of conspiracy theories जो होते हैं, they work on people who believe the world is entirely linear. कि मैंने 10 रुपए हारून को दे दिए, हारून ने फिर उस बंदे के कान में ये बात कर दी, उसने फिर ये काम कर दी, फिर मुल्क बैठ गया. राइट? दैट इज नॉट हाउ कंट्रीज वर्क, दैट इज नॉट इवन हाउ पीपल वर्क. ये जो समटाइम्स हम एक जोक करते थे कि ठीक है, लाइक पीपीपी के दौर में किसी की मुर्गी मर गई हो कि यार ये जरदारी का करप्शन, ठीक है ना, लाइक एक लिंक रैंडम बना देते थे कि ये दिस इज
इस वजह से है.
and the world is just like so complex. There are conspiracies, and quite often there are declared interests. Like दो मुल्क के, there's nothing secret about it that two countries don't get along.
जी.
ठीक है ना. लेकिन ये जो आप कह रहे हैं कि like, so what people do, especially in the age of the internet, is they'll self-select. They'll search the net until they find that crazy opinion that mimics what they believe, और वही आपको दे देंगे. But the real thing is like जो आप कह रहे हैं कि like if you do get knowledge, if you do have reading, have you reflected sufficiently कि you have an opinion on it, and again a little bit of exposure to people, a little more in-person engagement, फिर आपको पता लग जाता है कि what is possible and what isn't possible.
Thank you so much, Fasi. Thank you so much for taking the time for talking to me. And
Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot, actually.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a great day. And inshallah, stay in touch.
Okay. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.